Good afternoon. The 15 minutes have become 10 minutes. The topic for internationalization of higher education, most of it, some of aspects of it has been dealt in the previous session, and I'm therefore going to question some of the assumptions in the Indian context, what really we are looking for and where the world is taking us. So in a way, it's a kind of a debate I want to raise on the whole issue of internationalization. And why am I raising this? Because we have been told internationalization has been there for centuries, but only during the last 5 or 10 years, the whole question of what does internationalization mean has been raised. So let me start that debate by raising a few questions. First thing which I'll touch upon is what is internationalization? Why internationalization of higher education? Third is how is internationalization perceived across the world? And finally, how is internationalization perceived in India? Because the latest 5-year plan, the 12th 5-year plan, I'm told, has introduced one section on internationalization of higher education in India, and specific steps are being expected to be taken in the 12th 5-year plan. And I'll briefly touch on those in conclusion. So what is internationalization? One of my friends who is an academician, J Knight, who is considered to be an authority on this subject, has looked at internationalization in very academic term, and that's what I'm going to question also. Is internationalization of higher education only to be perceived as an academic exercise, or does it have economic and to a certain extent even political dimensions? And that's what I'm going to question in a way, the definition given by Jane Knight. She says, internationalization of higher education is defined as the process of integrating an international, intercultural, and a global dimension into the goals, functions, which means teaching, learning, research, services, and delivery of higher education. That means we are basically asking our education systems to be such that our students are exposed to other cultures, and then we heard about internationalizing our curriculum so that students learn about other worlds, other cultures through education. Now, at the same time, Jane Knight has also questioned that there is no one uniform formula. And she therefore says there is no one-size-fits-all model for internationalization. That means every country, every institution, every government has a right, in a way, to look at its own expectations of internationalization. And in fact, India is going through that exercise right now. So let's look at these definitions and why am I questioning them apart from its academic content. Now, the way I looked at internationalization really is a follow-up of other processes which have taken place. Namely, the first exercise in globalization, in my view, is the political globalization, which happened soon after World War II in 1945 and the setting up of the UN. That's the first time the world got together on a political front, and that's where I think the globalization concept started. Then we had in 1995, once the world was sort of at peace, the trade started. Economics was the purpose of getting together, and we had the World Trading Organization, WTO, which set rules as to how the countries should work with each other in terms of the WTO rules. And therefore, we had the General Agreement on Trades and Services. And one of the major changes which took place, and that's why I'm questioning whether internationalization of education is only an academic exercise or has it become an economic exercise. Sure enough, GATT says that education has to be treated as an industry. And the moment we consider education as an industry, that means you can provide education services as a part of a trading arrangement. And that's where I'm questioning that internationalization of education cannot be only limited to an academic exercise, but it has gone into economic exercise as well. Now, therefore, there is a debate now, many scholars question this. Internationalization of education is not globalization. There is some difference between globalization and internationalization. And there may be semantics, what exactly is the difference. But in my view, for the present presentation, I would assume that globalization and internationalization of education is perhaps one and the same, mainly because of the argument I have given that education cannot be looked at in isolation. It has a political dimension and an economic dimension as well. So let's see why one is getting into this area. First of all, what is the impact of internationalization? First is increase in global employability. Students are the first one who have learned the importance of internationalization. They knew where the markets were. They knew that the jobs are going to be available all across the world. Only now we are now talking of India having a demographic dividend, and Indian students, Indian population will have a market across the world, and the global market of employment may be flooded with India. But students knew about this much before, and therefore they are the ones who said, we want to go to the best of institutions so that our employability increases. And therefore the students started moving around. Education as an industry, which I mentioned, is the next motivation for internationalization of education. That started once you start economics, competition, the universities started competing for the best students. And we heard in the previous session how university world ranking exercise has started, and we have number of rankings, and India always gets worried that we are not in one of these ranks, we are not high at all. So I'm not surprised India has started its own ranking approach, or how do we consider our universities to be world-class. Apart from this, every time, I think we were told again in the last session, that you have to measure. Each quantity could be measurable. So there have been now measurements on starting. How do you measure internationalization? And the UNESCO has encouraged the International Association of Universities to come up with a methodology. And a survey has been carried out, last 3 surveys have been carried out, on how do we measure internationalization. And I'm briefly going to give you the outcome of those surveys as performed by IAU, International Association of Universities. Now, the most important factor I have always said is the students. Students are the driving force, driving engine for internationalization. And you can see over the years, the growth of students traveling abroad has exponentially growing. And from about less than 1 million students in 1975, by 2025, we already expect, in fact, even this number has already surpassed, and there are expectations that 10 million students will be traveling outside their country. And they, in my view, are the real dynamics of internationalization of higher education. And this growth of student population has changed the expectations of the institutions, of the students, of the universities, even expectations from the faculty. Now there is a diversity. Where are students going? We did have this number of presenters last time told us USA continued to be the largest destination for international students. But over the last decade, it has changed. The share of US has reduced to a certain extent, and other countries have started catching up. Even China, which was nowhere in 2001, has now taken a share of about few percent. 5-6% of students are now going to China. So it goes to show that students are the ones who are driving the countries to attract students and improve universities. Even, let's go to other dimension which I talked of, namely the political dimension. In the beginning, very few students used to go to China. The reason is the language. Language was a big barrier and nobody would like to go to China. But the importance of China for economic and political reasons as well has grown so much that a country like USA, which always criticized China for human rights, have now making special effort to send American students to China. And in fact, there's a program which Obama has started. It's called 100,000 Strong, which means the target is to send during the next 3 or 5 years, 100,000 American students should go to China. And that program itself, in my view, is a political motivation for internationalization. Now, economic impact is there. Number of countries are using this as a source of revenue. We were given in the last session several speakers, particularly USA, UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. These are the countries which are now looking at the student population. In what way do they add their economy? USA, of course, leads with $21 billion annually. And I'm told this number is monitored not by the academic institutions or by the education department, but by the Department of Commerce. Department of Commerce looks at the revenue generated by students coming to USA. And the moment this revenue starts coming down, there's a pressure. There's a pressure on the universities to make sure that more students come into the country. Other countries are also following this example: UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand. But I'm sad to say, in India, we are not even making an effort of what is the source of revenue that we should get. So India is nowhere in this economic race of trying to use the students for increasing revenue. Now, competition in globalization education is starting ranking of universities. I don't want to get into that. We have already had a long session on that. Now, this also, everyone knows what is world class. Everybody wants to be a world class. But if you were again told last time, everybody wants one world class university. No one knows what it is, and no one knows how to get one. So we are still all groping. What is this world class university to be? How are we measuring internationalization? The measure UNESCO has sponsored through the International Association of Universities, and they are measuring certain parameters from a survey carried out over 2,000 universities and institutions. About 700, 800 responded, and it appears that Europe is the one which is very, very strongly interested in the whole exercise of internationalization. If you look at asked various countries, what is your priority? Find most of the countries are now prioritizing, yes, we want to internationalize. And this is the medium priority. Governments are giving priority, institutions are giving priorities, and so all the association of universities are also encouraging universities to internationalize. The rationale, why are countries rationalizing? Why are institutions rationalizing this whole aspect of internationalization? Once again, the important parameter is everybody says that we have to get our students ready for the world. Our students have to be able to compete in the world market. So improving the students' education through internationalization is the topmost priority. But there are other areas, including India feels research, enhancing our research is one way of achieving that target through internationalization. At the same time, there are concerns also about, are there any risks in internationalization? And what are the benefits of internationalization? 96% of the countries feel that there are benefits from internationalization. At the same time, 70%, the big blue sector I've shown, are saying there are risks in internationalization. So let's quickly look at what are these benefits and risks that we are talking about. The benefits expected and risks perceived are listed 4, 5 ones. The first one, internationalization helps to enhance the international awareness of the students and the faculty. They are the ones who are going to be the world manpower required, and therefore it's important to prepare them. Most of the developing countries see the greatest benefit in terms of enhancing their research capability. India falls in that category. Third benefit is most of the developing countries the risk. Every developing countries feel that internationalization is going to take away our students, and we are going to be having a brain drain. That's an issue which is considered by most of the developing countries. A unique dimension which the Middle Eastern countries are looking at, they feel that this process will lead to dilution of their cultural identity. So it's not purely an academic exercise of internationalization. Middle Eastern countries feel that their culture is going to be diluted through students going outside and becoming internationalized. And finally, within North America, within the USA, there is concern that internationalization is getting into a commercial aspect. And many purists in the academic community in USA feel that this is not what we should be doing. That means the whole question of trying to earn revenue is being questioned. Also, there are misconceptions about internationalization. Everybody feels having more number of international students is a way to internationalize. Some people feel more international visitors, more international faculty is the faculty. More MOUs signed, a lot of it has been talked about it by the earlier speaker. So there are a number of ways people are having a misconception of what is internationalization. And finally, India itself has got its own concern, and I'll briefly come to that. India has, in the 12th five-year plan, introduced a major section on internationalization. What do we want to do? And one of the assumptions is that we expect our faculty to be enhancing in their research. We hope that through the process of internationalization in India, we will be able to get into the world-class university. So that is the hope. And I'm not sure how we are going to achieve this, because there are a lot of hurdles on the way to get into world-class universities and to enhance this process of research. But nevertheless, there's also a plan in the 12th five-year plan in India which says a national agency will be created. I'm very critical of this because I think we always like to create new and new organizations. But a new agency is supposed to be created under the 12th five-year plan for the next 5 years, which will be India International Education Center. And this center is supposed to help universities to internationalize. Let us hope this helps, but we have yet to start on this, and I don't know where we will be getting into. Finally, I want to conclude by saying that just as in the 1990, when the economic liberalization in India took place, we were at that time, compare the two, the education was totally government controlled in 1991. In 2009, 2010, the industry had already started becoming vibrant, competitive industry into developing economy. We got into the privatization. India started privatization. And we hope at this rate, in 2020, when the industry becomes global market, India becomes the global hub, I hope that by that time, India also becomes a global hub in the area of education. So these two factors of education and industry, there is a commonality between the way India is approaching, and I hope we catch up faster on this whole question of becoming India, becoming an education hub. And finally, I want to conclude, being in Gujarat, you have to say, if you look back at the way Mahatma Gandhi looked at internationalization in his own way, and that's exactly what I think we should be doing after so many years of thinking. And he says, I'll end my talk by the quote, by Mahatma Gandhi's quote. He said, I do not want my house to be walled in all sides and my windows to be stuffed. I want the culture of all lands to be blown about my house as freely as possible, internationalization. But I refuse to be blown off my feet. That means be global, but make sure that you're local and be Indian. Thank you very much.